Hi everyone, welcome. I'm down here in my wormery checking in on a couple of European nightcrawler worm bins. Over the past few weeks, I knew that I would have a period of time when I'd be unable to get down here to my wormery, so I prepared a bunch of videos in advance, and then there was a little bit of a dead spot there when I wasn't able to come down here and tend to the worms. And then once I got back on track with returning after that short little pause, a lot of my systems had gone a dozen or more days without receiving a check-in. And at this point I must be caught up, because these systems, there's only been 10 days that have passed between now and the last check-in. These systems got their 6th feeding last time 10 days ago. And if all goes as planned, today's feeding that they're getting is going to become feeding number 7. There was just this little chunk of newspaper. I guess it must be missing from right there. Worms all over the place hanging out on the top sheet of newspaper here. So we're going to have to evict these little guys. I mean, the other option would be to just sort of fold this piece of paper over in such a way that they remain protected from the bright lights overhead and don't feel the need to go squirming all over the place. So I think that that piece of paper, even though it has some holes in it, I think it could be reused. This one too, for sure. This one even looks better. And I wondered how these feeding zone indicators are going to be down below. But they also look quite good. I've got this big huge stack of coffee filters stacking up, and I thought that maybe if the feeding zone indicators had gotten to some sort of a certain point, possibly worn down already, then we could use them as supplementary bedding down in the feeding zones. Why don't we do that anyway? Because I've got a whole bunch of them. We'll just give them nice fresh new feeding zone indicators. So these coffee filters that were serving that purpose up until now, they'll just simply go in as supplementary bedding along with the feeding. And I've also got my prepared bedding, so we'll give them some of that too. It looks like last time we were in here we must have sprinkled a whole bunch of nice fresh leafy matter into these systems as a top coating. Perhaps that's why we've got so many worms hanging out near the surface. They seem to really like this stuff. Not only as a bedding, but also as a food source, because a good bit of it seems like it's been consumed as well. So these systems have a novelty, well, not both of them, one of the systems. Bin number 1 over here has got a novelty item running in it. It's a compostable bag, and even though these systems are only 70 days old today, that compostable bag came over with the worms from their old home, because the compostable bag is now 232 days in service, and we've been gradually seeing the bag break down. So it certainly doesn't look the way it did when it was still brand new. It was a pretty good size bag, kind of resembling a plastic bag, basically. Definitely meant to be plastic-ish in its feel, as far as its texture and everything. But I guess the main difference just being that it was labeled clearly as a bag that's compostable. So now, after only 10 days, I did sort of anticipate that we might find ourselves a good worm party down here, because we gave them a nice feeding of a bunch of stuff that I was almost certain would bring out a big crowd of worms. They got stuff like mango peels and a couple partially rotted chunks of broccoli. This is some of the mango peel right here. And why don't we just go for it? Let's check out this big mound of worms that's hanging out down here smack in the middle. I guess I'm just trying to be a little bit careful, so why don't we first tend to dealing with the compostable bag carefully without destroying it in the process of trying to get a crazy worm spotting here. But here's the bag. And perhaps out here in the bright lights it'll get depopulated. The worms will just kind of exit, and then we can take a closer look at it after there's no more worms hanging out on it. But down here, where the mango and the broccoli and even some banana peels, as you can see. We've got ourselves a really big pile of European night crawlers. Both bins are populated with European night crawlers. They're kind of like brother bins or sister bins. I mean, they might even be twin bins. Offhand, I don't know if they've got the same size population. But when it's thought that they do, we treat them as twin bins. Otherwise, they're, you know, kind of sibling bins, if you will. I believe that part of the reason that we're seeing such a crowd over here is because of what's visible already now that some of the worms have cleared away. Is the seed of the mango is right here. And the mango seed has this kind of fuzzy outer surface. So I think the worms really enjoy kind of peeling that that fibrous material off the mango seed. And then eventually they'll get down into the mango seed and consume that as well. So there's numerous reasons the worms really seem to like the mango for whatever reasons. It almost feels like I'm holding an ice cream cone. Is that what it looks like to you too? Is it just my imagination? You know why? Because the seed is down here, so I'm holding the seed like a firm, stiff sort of an object, and then the crazy ball of worms resting on top appears to be like a big pile of ice cream. Alright, these poor worms, you know, I'm kind of having a little bit too much fun here at the expense of these little wormies. Let's cut them a break. Let's just set them aside. Let's finish going through the feeding zone here. So I know there were a few other things that were thrown in here. Here they go. Banana peel, I believe, was the other kind of popular item that we gave them last time. Holy cow. I knew that after 10 days, especially after the feeding that these guys got last time, that we'd see some pretty crazy activity going down in the feeding zones of these two systems. So I think we've opened up a good enough size hole into which today's feeding can go. Perhaps not as exciting of a feeding as what they got last time. This looks like mostly veggies. I'm not even sure if there's any fruit in here at all. So luckily there's still a good bit of banana and mango and other leftover bits of yummy fruits for them to continue partaking in as leftovers from the previous feeding before they have to turn to the boring vegetables. So this is what the bag is starting to look like. I've been wondering if I should try to do something about, you know, keeping this bag together, because here clearly there's a piece of it that has come dislodged from the rest of the bag as a whole. I am quite surprised to see that it is still kind of holding together as a single object. But I do want to be careful because I don't want to be responsible for it losing any more fragments. I have actually thought that maybe I would put it inside of one of those little red net bags, like a little mesh bag in which you sometimes buy certain types of produce. And then I would know that the stuff is kind of remaining together and is contained, and then we'd be able to check in on it and see all the bits and pieces of it together and not have anything that has fallen off get lost. Now that is so different, isn't it? That mango seed right there. You can see that fibrous husk that I was referring to earlier that was driving the worms bananas over in the other system, but here it's almost like if it was like something that the worms hate. I wonder what the heck's going on over in this system. So unusual. And then here too you see a banana peel with only a few dozen worms hanging out in it. Very, very weird. It almost seems like all the worms decided they're going to go hang out in one bin, and maybe they left all the worms left this bin over here and crawled over into the other bin to party with their buddies. Let's take one more little opening, or one more little look down into the feeding zone over on this side and see what we see. Definitely not anywhere near as dramatic as what we saw over in bin number 1. And I wonder why that would be. Same exact foods, you know, mango peel clearly eaten, all nibbled free of all the juicy mango that was still stuck to it. Banana, mango seed, very weird to see like virtually no activity on it. That's definitely got me scratching my head. So let's just proceed. I'm not going to try to be a Sherlock Holmes here and try to figure out exactly what's going on, but it's certainly a very distinct and obvious difference from one bin to the other, and it does make me wonder why. Could it be the compostable bag? Somehow I doubt it. So let's stick to the game plan before I forget. I do have replacement feeding zone indicators that we can place into these systems. So we'll go ahead and we'll recycle the old ones, drop them down as part of the foundational bedding for today's feeding. And once we finish, we'll be able to mark the feeding zones with brand new replacements. And now I've got my prepared bedding here. It's just a combination of shredded paper and cardboard. On this go around, it was mainly shredded paper bag, so it doesn't look like the typical shredded paper assortment of newspaper and other things. In this case, it was just a whole bunch of shredded paper bag, which very closely resembles the shredded cardboard. So it all has this very natural appearance. This has little fragments of leaves in it too, so it's a pretty nice bedding. Prepared a number of days ago with moisture and just left to sit around. So hopefully the worms enjoy it. And it does seem like we've got space enough in here to be pretty generous with it, so I put a bunch of it in there as the foundation for today's feeding. And I've got this other stuff over here too, which I thought I would include in the bedding. A lot of times I sprinkle stuff that looks very similar to this into my worm bins. It's worm chow that I usually include with my feedings that resembles this stuff, but this is not worm chow because I ran out of worm chow yesterday. I'm gonna have to make some more. This stuff is pulverized corn cob. Kind of an unusual oddity of a feeding, but I had a whole bunch of corn cob laying around and I ran it through the food processor and ended up with that nice flaky material, which I hope the worms appreciate. In the past, when I've fed it into my worm bins, I have seen leftovers of this stuff remaining, so I think it still has that tendency to be a little bit resistant to breakdown in the worm bins, just like whole corn cobs seem to do. But my assumption is that based on its tiny particle size, it's probably not going to last. So this feeding just somehow doesn't seem like it's all that generous, but that's okay. It has only been 10 days since we last came in here to feed them, so they've got plenty of leftovers, which I'm glad I reminded myself of. So we're going to get these leftovers back down into the feeding area too. And before we drop the leftovers back into this system, we're going to put that compostable bag right on top of the yummy foods, and then we're going to lay the leftover bits of banana peel and other things right on top of the compostable bag. I guess the whole idea of that being that we'd like to try to get the worms to come on right over and hang out on the compostable bag and possibly help break it down for us. Would you like a little taste of my delicious ice cream cone? Trust me, it's delicious. Alright, I think we're having just a little bit too much fun here. Why don't we bring an end to this check-in, let these little guys get back to working down my kitchen scraps and household waste. And before we do that though, I'd really like to at first quickly do a quick till of the outer edges of the system, both systems obviously. And I guess maybe the main reason I'm interested in doing this is because of bin number 2. Maybe that's where all the worms are hanging out for whatever reason. So I am curious to see what happens when we upturn those outer edges of bin number 2. Because it does seem for whatever reason that the worms in bin number 1 clearly came out to enjoy the feeding. But in bin number 2, especially on that mango seed, it seemed like there was not a whole lot of interest at all. Definitely makes me wonder, so I am very curious to see what's on the outer edges of bin number 2. Here in bin number 1, with all the worms we saw down the feeding zone, not too surprising that we didn't see a whole lot in the outer edges. I'm just wondering what we're going to see over in bin number 2. And you know what? I had my grid over here. I was going to sprinkle it down into the feeding zone, but I forgot. So why don't we just give them some anyway, but by just sprinkling it out onto the top surface here in bin number 1. In bin number 2, we can just put it into the food. I even had it in my hand earlier like I was about to put it in, and I think I got sidetracked. So let's see what we've got going on over on the outer edges in bin number 2. Perhaps that's where all the worms are hiding out for some reason. Kind of weird, considering both bins have been getting managed almost identically and we're all fed the same exact foods in both systems. Why you would get one behavior from one bin and a different type of behavior from another, I don't understand. I mean, I also kind of wonder if it could have something to do with the way I'm storing these systems, because I've got them stacked one over the other. Since they've got the same start date and they're the same age and everything, and they're kind of sibling bins, I've got them one resting on top of the other. And I kind of wonder if maybe the... Let's see, how does it go? I usually have bin number 1 on top and bin number 2 on the bottom. And it makes me wonder if perhaps, you know, bin number 1, where we had kind of the craziness going on in the feeding area, could it have been because that's the system that's out on top? Doesn't seem like a valid explanation, but I figured that's one difference between the two bins, despite my effort to keep them in sync. I do always stack them up with bin number 1 on top and bin number 2 on the bottom, but it is kind of hard to imagine that that would be the reason. Especially my theory of the worms kind of cruising over to visit bin number 1, and that would require them to leave bin number 2 and actually crawl up into bin number 1, which makes it even less plausible. Doing it the other way might be a little bit more believable in terms of worms exiting the upper bin and ending up down in the lower bin, but the opposite direction seems very hard to imagine being a possibility. So let's not forget, we want to put feeding zone indicators down like we usually do. So we've got a couple nice replacements here. We'll drop them in before we cover up with the top covering newspaper. And the top covering newspapers are definitely getting weathered, but we did sort of commit to keeping them around for one more go around, it seems. This one's definitely seen better days. Is it supposed to be like this? I can't even tell you for sure. I believe it might be, but I could be wrong. Whatever. That one definitely looks to me like it might need replacement soon. Most likely at the next check-in. This one seems like it's doing better, but my guess is that if we replace one, we'll replace both. So chances are that these chunks of top covering newspaper are going to become supplementary bedding next time as well. So that's it for our check-in, everyone, with these now 70-day-old European night crawlers. The one thing that exceeds the 70 days considerably is simply the amount of time that compostable bag has been in service, 232 days. That is quite a long time, and it's amazing to see that it's still in one piece for the most part. Let's say 2 pieces at this point. So I'm curious to see how much longer it's going to last. It seems like it still has a ways to go, but I guess we'll see. So hopefully they enjoyed feeding number 7. Next time we come back in here, it'll be feeding number 8. Alright everyone, thanks for watching. That was the video. If you enjoyed it, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's always really appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. That's very much appreciated as well. Alright everyone, thanks for much for watching. Have a great day. Bye now.